Hello there. My name is Jasom Jensai, and man, I love that Mandalorian episode. That is for sure my favorite one now. Um, blows Chapter 8, well, not quite out of the water, but it's significantly better. Um, wow. So this episode is going to be all about that. But before we get into that, let's do the question of the stream. If you don't know, the question of the stream is a question during the stream, of course. And if you get it right, if you're the first person to get it right without looking it up, um, then you get 10 points. So the question of the stream for today is, where was Jango Fett born? And I'm looking for like a planet or a moon or like a space station, like a general location of where he was born. Um, so yeah, if you know that, leave it in the chat, leave it in the comments if you're watching after the show, and you might get 10 points. But I've had enough of that. You can leave that whenever. Let's get into the Mando finale. So I drew up this thumbnail slash picture that you're seeing during the show, like before I saw the episode, because I've been super busy today, and the reason I'm doing it today is because I'm going on like a family trip to see my cousins who live in another state. So I won't have time. This is like the only time I could do it, and I'm leaving at 12:30. So only time I could do it. So I had to draw up this thumbnail before I saw the episode. So this is all predictions I had is, will Ahsoka return? The Dark Troopers. Will we see Thrawn? Mando versus Gideon. Grogu is captured. And it's like all these things. And most of them happen. So that's pretty cool. I did not predict Luke showing up. Oh, by the way, this is a spoiler discussion. I kind of just spoiled that. I should probably put that in the title. You know what? I'll put that in the title after, if I remember. I'll write it down. While I write it down, leave your thoughts about this episode in the chat or in the comments. I would love to hear it. So let's start with the beginning. And usually I have like notes because I watch it and then watch it again the day I'm streaming, and I write down notes. So I have it kind of fresh in my memory. I can look back, see, oh, that happened first. But I did not have time, and I was too focused on the show because it was so good to write during it, which usually happens, but this time especially. I did write what a great intro, but that's about it. So that reminds me, the intro. So it shows up with, I think the first thing you see is the Imperial shuttle flying away from Slave One. That was cool. And then eventually, of course, they get boarded, which makes sense why the shuttle wasn't blown up immediately then, because Boba is, of course, a really good pilot, although Jango is a good pilot too. So they board, and there's Dr. Pershing, which I do want to see more of him. I think he's a very interesting character. And is he just on that shuttle? Like, I don't know. I guess he'll get captured by the New Republic. So yeah. Dr. Pershing, he basically just gets captured, and that was a very cool scene. How that like Imperial trooper was like taunting Cara Dune about Alderaan. Wow, he's like, you'll wish you never left Alderaan. That was so cool to see. I don't know. I just really like that. I feel like it brings out a lot of emotion in Cara Dune, which brings out a lot of emotion in the audience because they have empathy. I mean, they haven't experienced getting your planet blown up, but they've experienced loss. They can imagine losing not just their grandpa or their family, or it's like literally everyone except for maybe a few people on the same planet. So it's a huge loss, and it brings up all these emotions, which emotions are kind of the point of the story. So I thought that was a great scene. So what a great intro. And then I literally could say, what a great middle, what a great ending, what a great, like, I could say that about pretty much everything in this episode. I don't think there was a thing I didn't like, and there were a lot of things that I super enjoyed. Like, in Chapter 8, there's a few things I didn't really like that much, but there was also a lot of things that I super enjoyed. And then in Chapter 9, there was nothing I didn't like, pretty much. It was all really good. There was a few things, but like mostly it was super good. Or maybe that there was an episode it was chapter 12. That's what it was, where I basically said, yeah, there was like nothing I don't like in here, and that's the one where Cara Dune and Grief Karga take on that Imperial hideout on Navarro, in season 2. And that one pretty much liked everything, but there wasn't anything super significant. And if there was, but it was like only a few things. This episode had so much significance, and not just for like connecting to the sequels and the originals, but like connecting to the show, which super awesome. So after that, they show up, they find Bo-Katan. I don't know how they did, but Bo-Katan, of course, knows Boba Fett. And so does the other Night Owl. That was super cool to see their interactions. He's like, I'm the son of Jango Fett. And she's like, no, you're, what did she call him? Basically, she's like, a clone. I've heard your voice thousands of times. Like, wow. You just making fun of his heritage. Wow. And then, of course, they get in a fight. And Boba, he doesn't lose, but he gets beaten. They do a cool move that takes him out, which I thought was awesome. And that's a move that the Night Owls are repeatedly using. Like, Bo-Katan, of course, uses it when she first shows up. She, like, does a roundhouse kick by using her jetpack to fly up. And then she does, like, a sumo-type flip thing. I don't know, not sumo. Some flip-type thing to kind of like a wrestling move. Kind of like the Flying Bunny, if you know what that is. And she just throws him, breaks a table. It was awesome. And then later she does that same kind of thing, and I think she elbows a stormtrooper guy in the face. So that's a cool move that they use pretty repeatedly. But yeah, it was cool to see Boba fight and show how powerful he is, but that he's not the best fighter ever, which I think most people are like, oh, Boba's the best. He could take on, like, Anakin Skywalker. It's like, no, he cannot. But he is a good pilot and a good hunter and a good tracker. He's good at everything, pretty much, whereas Mando's not the best tracker, but he's a great warrior. And Mando's not the best warrior either. But, like, Bo-Katan, mostly a warrior. She's a bit of a leader. Who's a person who's mostly just a warrior? Who would it be? I honestly can't think of anyone off the top of my head. It's gotta be, like... Yeah, I can't think of anyone. They're all, like, hunters. What about bodyguards? Yeah, sorry, I can't think of one. Leave your thoughts in the comment. Who do you think is most focused on specifically fighting? I guess the Gamorrean guards are, but they're not extremely competent fighters, so that's kind of a problem. But yeah, so I like how Boba is being treated the way I would he's being treated as close to how I see him as I would expect, knowing how other people see him. And of course, they're probably just, I don't think everybody is quite as intense, oh, Boba's the best, as like I portray. It's just, there's been a lot of people who, in comment sections, and they're like, oh yeah, Boba is like easily the best bounty hunter ever. He's best at everything. He's better than Jango. He's better than, well, actually they say Jango is as good as him usually. But like Star Wars Theory, he's a pretty big fan of Boba, but he's not quite as extreme. He's also a big fan of Anakin, and that's pretty extreme. But yeah. Anyways, that's a big rant about Boba. Sorry about that. I hope that interests some of you. But let's move on to the next part. Oh, actually, still in that scene, I like how Bo-Katan is like, yeah, we need your help finding Moff Gideon. And she's like, you're never going to find him. Hang on. Alright, so yeah, that was super cool to see Bo-Katan like, yeah, you're never going to find him. And then Mando's just like, well, I already found him. I just need your help taking him out. So yeah, that was cool. I liked the dynamic there. Then what happened? Then they came up with a plan, which I was surprised that Dr. Parshing helped them so much, because he's kind of betraying the Empire. So, I don't know. That felt a little bit off to me, but that's about the only thing in this episode that I was like, that's not quite perfect. So yeah, I didn't really like that, but it's easily forgivable, especially considering everything else that happened in this episode and in this show. the other thing is Dr. Pershing is not the kind of person to be an Imperial fanatic. He's not like that one guy that Mayfeld shot in the last episode, or he's not that one guy that Bo-Katan was like interrogating about Moff Gideon, and then, like he killed himself to not give away information. He's more balanced. He's not super focused on the Empire. So it does kind of make sense, but I feel like he gave information a little too readily. Maybe if they had showed him like them like kind of threatening torture or something. Not torture, but I guess it's torture. Yeah. Then I guess it would make a lot more sense. Or if they showed him be more afraid, but he seemed kind of confident and comfortable. So, yeah. Then they come up with a plan. They get to the shuttle, and Bo-Katan kind of crashes the ship. They all pile out, and then they all shoot everywhere, and that's where you see the one Mandalorian do the jetpack and then punch that I was talking about earlier. Same move that took out Boba. Almost not really took out. Same move that knocked over Boba. So that was pretty cool to see. Yeah, then they move on. They're basically just moving through, and then I liked the scene where a bunch of stormtroopers come out and they're like on this bridge, and the two Mandalorians jump over the edges. And by the way, no railings again, which is kind of funny. They jump over the side, and of course they have jetpacks. So then when a bunch of stormtroopers come in from behind them and kind of like trap them, and there's just way too many of them, the Mandalorians can outflank them, catch them by surprise, and they're taken out in seconds. Hi, Maisie. Maisie's my dog, by the way. She's sniffing around. Good doggy. Anyways, so the other thing is when Mando steps out, there's this like Mandalorian motif, the music thing, and I thought that was just a nice touch by the composer. I don't know, I just liked it. It was a good touch. But then, of course, Moff Gideon activates the Dark Troopers, and those Dark Troopers were so scary. Like, I wasn't like, oh no, they're gonna kill me, but I was like, they look very menacing, and I recognize how menacing they look. So that was super awesome to see. And Mando gets there kind of right in time. He gets there right as they're walking out the door, and he kind of closes the door, but one of them gets out, and the rest are forced to just like punch the door over and over. And because of that, he gets to fight them and kind of test them, and also gets to use up his whistling birds, which comes into play later, of course. So he fights that thing, and at first I thought it was like the armor was made of Beskar, but then of course Luke's just chopping through them like so I guess it's just some very hard alloy that deflects blaster fire. But yeah, it was super cool. Like, okay, so the Dark Trooper had like him pushed up against the wall. I think he had like his hand around his, or like pushing on his chest or something, and he started punching him in the face. And at first I was like, oh no, he's about to get like killed or something by this Dark Trooper. But then, of course, he's wearing a Beskar helmet, which, I don't know, for some reason it kind of surprised me at first to see him just like punching and like no cracks, no bending. And then, of course, his head started bending like the wall behind him, which was very interesting. I thought that was cool. How did he get out of that? He did a flamethrower, and then it just threw him to the side. But then he got his Beskar spear and stabbed it in the wires. That was cool. That whole fight, the choreography in this episode was super good. Pretty much everything. So then after that, you see, he knocks them out of the airlock, which immediately I was like, they're going to come back later. They can fly, right? And they did, of course. So then he gets to Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon is like holding his lightsaber over Grogu, and that surprised me, but it was a good surprise. It made sense. It wasn't like a huge, awesome reveal that makes a lot of character development. It was like, that makes sense. That's good strategy. Kind of like reading a Thrawn book. Yeah. He's holding it over Grogu, and he's like, okay, yeah, you can have the child. And I thought what was going to happen is Moff Gideon was going to walk out and lock Mando in there. But instead, Moff Gideon kind of takes on Mando with his lightsaber. And here's what I think Moff Gideon was trying to do. I think he was trying to kind of test Mando. I don't know if he wants the Mandalorians to reunite. Maybe he wants them to do that so that they won't attack the Empire. They'll be focused on rebuilding. I don't know what his motivations are relative to like that, but I do know he knows a lot about Bo-Katan, and he doesn't like Bo-Katan, and he also probably knew his Dark Troopers were going to be able to return and get their way in, and just it wasn't going to matter whether Mando beat him then. All that matters is that the Dark Troopers would come back and take them out anyways. So, and he kind of says this as they're like stuck in the room. He's like, "You guys realize that everyone in this room except for me and the child is gonna die, so it's not really gonna matter." So I think he was just trying to get Mando to. I don't think he went easy on him, but I do think he kind of at least a little bit wanted Mando to either win or die. If he wins, then Bo-Katan gets jealous and it creates conflict between them. And if he dies, well, then there's one less Mandalorian to deal with. So, yeah, that was a very interesting turn of events to see him just attack Mando. And then, of course, Mando beats him, which I thought made sense. A lot of people thought Moff Gideon would be this super difficult-to-kill guy, but I think of him more as a general or a governor or a Moff. Not so much like governor. Okay, Moff doesn't have like in English we don't have the word Moff, right? So a Moff is basically one step above a governor in Star Wars, and then there's Grand Moff, which yeah. So the reason I said governor is because a lot of people don't realize what Moff is because we don't have an equivalent in English, and it's basically a government position that's one step above governor. So anyways, Moff Gideon, being a Moff, isn't necessarily a good warrior. He does wear armor, so he's probably at least a competent warrior. He does have a Dark Saber, so he's probably at least a competent warrior, but obviously not a Mando level warrior. And I did like the Mando spear fight, because a spear doesn't necessarily have to be his main weapon. Okay, so let me preface this. Neither Mando nor the Magistrate from Chapter 13 use the spear like a spear. They both use it more like a staff, and Mando a little bit like a sword, just a little bit. Which I thought didn't make sense for the Magistrate, considering that was her signature weapon. I would assume she had some time to practice with it, and if she did, she probably wouldn't be swinging around like that. She would probably be in a lower stance, stabbing forward, like a spearman, you know? But yeah, Mando uses it kind of like a staff, and that makes sense. Why would he be trained in a spear? Like, a sword kind of makes sense. Sabine was trained in a sword, so was her brother. I would assume most other Mandalorians are then. But Mando probably wouldn't be trained in a spear, maybe a staff. That looks cooler. So I guess that makes sense. But then, of course, he beats Moff Gideon, which I thought was cool. And also is very interesting, considering now he is basically Mandalore, right? Like, he should rule Mandalore. But then, of course, there's Bo-Katan. He doesn't want to rule Mandalore. He tries to give it to Bo-Katan, but Bo-Katan is like, nah, I'm not going to take it. Even though Sabine Wren just found it and brought it to... I guess she beat Gar Saxon, or not Gar Saxon. It's the other Saxon. I forget his name. He's the brother. But she did beat him, but he wasn't the rightful ruler. She would have to beat Maul, which, good luck. And then Maul died, of course, so I guess then who has it? It's kind of like the Elder Wand. Hang on just a second. Let me... Alright, I got a lot of background noise, so I shut my door. Anyways, so yeah. Mando is the ruler of Mandalore now, I guess. I want to see how this plays out, and I think that's going to be the focus of Season 3. But before I get to speculation about later and all the implications of Mando getting the Dark Saber, And the possible loopholes that Bo-Katan could try or use, or Mando could come up with and get her to use or something, or all the character conflicts, all the stuff around that. Um, I want to touch on like the ending. So they're all trapped in this room, and Bo-Katan, of course, finds out, oh, Mando won. He beat Moff Gideon. He's Mandalore, and there's Dark Troopers coming back, and they're gonna kill all of them, and they've got no chance. And of course, their strategy is to stand and shoot it with blaster fire, even though Mando has fought them and knows that's a stupid strategy, and instead they should like outflank them and hit them with the lightsaber and the spear. What else do they have? Maybe some explosives. I don't know. I would say give Bo-Katan the spear and Mando the saber, and then the rest can shoot blaster fire and be distractions. Yeah, either way they're gonna die. But like, you could use a better strategy than stand there and shoot. And that's probably the second thing I've thought of, that it's like, that's not quite perfect. I don't like it. Um. Anyways, and by the way, these things I don't like, they are they're very much nitpicks. So I still loved the episode. These aren't like any criticism. It's especially not a criticism of the storytellers, and the writers and the directors. They did such a great job on this episode, and nobody's gonna be perfect. And even if like you could write down like a line, and until it's executed, you don't know if it's gonna be perfect, or you don't know if it's gonna sound right. Um, and also they're probably not professional like gunfighters, and neither am I. Like all these tactics are just things that I'm like, oh, that would probably work. I could be completely wrong. Maybe that is the best tactic, and if you think that is, tell me why in the chat or in the comments. But these are just things that I think would make more sense if they were changed. And they, like, hindsight is 2020, right? You can't be perfect unless you go back and change, and then go back and change, and go back and change. You have to refine it. So with that said, I didn't like how they their strategy to use against the Dark Troopers, but ultimately it didn't matter because they closed to the blast doors, and a lone X-wing comes up, and I'm like, what? Is it like this Republic guy who's like trying to gather, like he knows there's something going on in the Outer Rim, and he's like what is it, that guy? What would he be doing here? How is one X-wing gonna help? Are they gonna like attack it? Is there more coming? Like what is this? And then at about the time that he was going into the hangar, which by the way is technically blocked off by the transport shuttle. I mean, that's kind of what they implied. I'd have to rewatch it to make sure. And I just realized that, by the way. I don't really care that much. It doesn't make sense, but oh well. Anyways, I'm like, that's Luke? It's gotta be Luke, right? It's an X-wing. Like, who else would be able to save them and also flies around in an X-wing? It's Luke. And then of course there's a Jedi, and it's got a green lightsaber. And then a while later, after he beats up a ton of Dark Troopers, you see the hilt, and it's Luke's lightsaber. I guess it could be a popular lightsaber design. Obi-Wan had it. I doubt it. At that point, I was like, yeah, it's Luke. It's for sure Luke. There's nothing else it could be. And he had his hood down like super far, which makes sense. He's a Jedi. He doesn't need to see, right? So, it's to keep the mystery of who it is, even though everyone knows it's Luke. But they wanted to have that nice face reveal. Anyways, he takes out all these guards, super awesome. And the choreography on this was not perfect, but it was still really good. He used a lot of Form 5 style combat, lots of deflecting blaster fire back, if I remember correctly. Or at least he had a stance that would do that. I don't think the blaster fire would do anything, so he maybe didn't do that. But he at least had a stance that would deflect it back usually. He's got a Xi'an stance. And he also has a lot of powerful swings, but he's also pretty quick, because of course he's facing blaster wielding opponents from many directions. He used the Force a bunch. The one thing I do think that was noticeably different was how smooth he moved. He moved a lot smoother than in Return of the Jedi, which makes sense. Usually as you get more and more, as you practice more and more, you get more refined and more skilled and more smooth, which makes you more fast. you're more comfortable, right? So that makes sense to me. It's not a problem. It can be explained very easily. Um, so yeah, I liked the fighting. I liked the force powers. Um, it was super awesome to see him crush that Dark Trooper. It wasn't anything super intense. Like one thing I thought of as he was coming up the elevator was he's gonna pop out and just force push all the Dark Troopers at once, um, and they're all gonna die. But that would be a bit crazy. Maybe he could force push all of them and then leap forward and just slash them to pieces after they've been knocked out of, like, they're not. If you get knocked over, even if you don't get like finished off, or even if you don't get defeated by that, you're on balance. You're retreating. You have to regain your balance while fighting. You're probably gonna get finished off immediately after you fall over. So he could have done that and then took them out while they're unbalanced, but that's fine. He didn't. He did use the force a couple times. I believe he did one force push and then one force crush, which is a good reference to the Gamorrean warriors in episode 6. I don't know if those were force chokes or force crushes. I think after this scene it might be a force crush, which is still kind of dark in nature. It's okay. Force choke. Yeah, I'll discuss that later. Anyways, you don't know. I will discuss this now. Force choke, as a dark side ability. So what makes something a dark side ability? Does a force choke meet that criteria? Like, what about it makes it dark? And I think what makes an ability like a dark side ability is its intent and its use. So things like force lightning. What are the possible uses of force lightning? You can hurt someone, you can torture someone, you can damage someone, you can kill someone. Those are all usually pretty dark side. In Legends, Plo Koon had a ability called Force Judgment, which was basically light side force lightning. And that's a pretty good name, like Force Judgment. If you need to basically kill someone, you're judging them to be more of a threat than like their life is worth. So basically, if they're like a killer and they're about to kill a planet, and the only way to stop them is to kill one person, it's better to kill one person than the entire planet, right? So, boom, Force Judgment. That's a light side ability then. But something like Force Lightning, see how Palpatine uses it. He tortures Maul, he tortures Luke, he kills people. That's a dark side ability. Like, there's pretty much no way around that. It's a dark side ability. And then there's what other abilities? Force Choke. That's another common dark side ability. And that one is pretty much always used for killing and torturing. And but the way Luke uses it is to move someone out of the way, but very forcefully. Or in the case of the Dark Trooper, crush it. But then again, it's not alive, so I guess you could say it is alive, but at the same time, it's not alive. IG-11 thinks he's alive, or thinks he's not alive, but those droids from that one Clone Wars arc, R2-D2, all those astromechs, and what's it called? Why am I forgetting this name? Pit droid, that's what it is. Pit droids are awesome, by the way. I used to love that you touch their nose and they collapse. It was super cool. It is still super cool, but less so now that I'm older. Anyways, they think they're alive, but IG-11 thinks he isn't. It's a little bit of a gray area, so I guess Luke... And their purpose... I suppose it comes down to their programming. Those droids are like mechanics, right? So their purpose in life is to build, to repair, all that kind of thing. But IG-11, his purpose is to kill, or nurse and protect afterwards. But he still doesn't consider himself alive. I would consider him alive, but I guess he doesn't. But the Dark Troopers, their whole purpose is to kill. I guess you could say defend, but is that really what's going to happen? I don't really think so. So, and I don't think Luke does either. So he's going to kill it. I don't... yeah. So you could say it's a dark ability, but I don't think it is. And in the case of the Gamorrean guards, he kind of needed them to get out of the way, and they probably wouldn't listen to just a gentle force push. They would probably get angry. But if he, like, instills fear in them by applying pressure on their chest and throat and everything and moving them out of the way, they're not going to get in his way, which is kind of the point. So in that case, it is a, not a light side ability. It's a neutral ability. So that's my talk about dark side versus light side, force choke, all that stuff. So let's move on to the ending and how so basically, if you've seen the episode, you know what happens. Luke goes in, um, Mando says goodbye to Baby Yoda. And I love how Mando takes off his helmet for him. The way they executed that was so well done. Um, one thing that kind of semi bothered me, but I thought was just kind of funny, and there's no way around it. It's better if you do it this way. He takes off his helmet, and later you see it just neatly set down, but raise your hand if you can reach the ground while standing up without bending over. And he didn't bend over, so like, it's just kind of funny. It's better than him dropping it and you hear a clang and it like rolls a little bit, and then you pan down and you see it like come to a stop as it bumps into something, and then Cara Dune raised eyebrow, and then you cut back to Mando. Like, that'd be pretty funny. You don't really want that, so instead you're gonna have it neatly there, which of course makes me laugh because I'm like, who can reach the ground while standing up without bending over? So that's my only thing that's not perfect, but there's no way around it, so it was executed well. Yeah, that whole scene, it makes sense. It is very emotional, very well done. The one thing that not the one thing, one other thing that I didn't like that was featured in this episode is Mando's missing rifle, which he lost in chapter 14. Tragic loss. Rest in peace. I love that rifle. But with that out of the way, I've got two more things to discuss. Grogu and the Dark Saber. I'm going to start with Grogu because I've talked about that more recently. And leave your thoughts on this in the chat and in the comments. So Grogu is going to Luke's Jedi Temple, which, as we know from the sequels, is going to be destroyed. This doesn't necessarily mean Grogu is going to die. He could be off on some other mission. He could be, I don't know. There's a lot of ways to get around it. They could even do the separate timeline thing, which I strongly hope that they don't do. I'm not the biggest fan of the sequels. I don't really like The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi was fine, I guess. And The Rise of Skywalker is just like why it's okay. Anyways, I don't really like the sequels that much, but I don't want them erased. That's a precedent I just don't want. Like, I don't think they should even consider that as a possibility. If you're just gonna like erase something just because the fans don't like it, then what's the point of canon anymore? So please, I hope they don't erase the sequels or create a new timeline. Because if they create a new timeline, how are they going to do that? Time travel. And that's another thing I don't want in Star Wars. That's probably my least favorite part about that might be my least favorite part about Rebels is they introduce time travel. Like, there are a lot of kind of annoying things. The humor is kind of childish at times. But if I had to choose one thing that I could take out of Rebels, that would probably be it. I don't know how I would have Ahsoka survive. Maybe I just don't know. But yeah, I feel like time travel did not need to be introduced just so you could have Ahsoka survive. You could even have her die. Like, that's a possibility. But time travel, I don't want that. So Grogu is at Luke's Jedi Temple. I hope they don't retcon the sequels. That's all I really have to say about that. It was a good goodbye, and I'm gonna miss him, but it'll be fine. That's where he belongs. So moving on to talk about the Dark Saber, which I have a lot more to say on. I think. I mean, I haven't really scripted this out or anything. I could maybe have only a few sentences. But anyways, the Dark Saber. So, as we know, the Dark Saber is basically the Elder Wand for Mandalorians. So whoever has it rules Mandalore, but you can only have it if you defeat it. If you defeat the previous person who had it. So, Pre Vizsla had it. We don't know how he got it, but he must have got it honorably. And then Maul got it, and Bo-Katan is like, no, I'm not going to serve you. No outsider will rule Mandalore. And that kind of makes sense. Maul has not sworn the creed. he's not a Mandalorian. So Sabine Wren finds it, doesn't kill Maul, brings it to Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan doesn't defeat Sabine. So I guess she didn't really get it honorably at that time either. But then Moff Gideon gets hit. We don't know how. Based on his duel with Mando, I don't think it was a duel, but he could have got it through a battle. He could have sent like a couple death troopers and I don't know something. Whatever. He gets it somehow, and then Mando gets it. And now Mando is Mandalore, but Bo-Katan, of course, has disregarded those rules before with Maul. However, she'll have to come up with a new excuse because Mando is very clearly a Mandalorian. Some would say even more Mandalorian than Bo-Katan. Although in this episode he does take off his helmet. So I guess he's now same. I guess he kind of learned that. I still think he's more of a Mandalorian because he's still got more of a traditional Mandalorian, I should say. Because he is a foundling, so he's from another point of view. You could say, oh, his lineage is not true. He's not a Mandalorian. Which is the big thing with like Boba Fett. Some people think Boba Fett has like a claim to the throne of Mandalore, which I don't think is true at all. Boba may have been a descendant of Jango Fett, who there are legends about him being the like foundling of Jaster Muriel, who ruled the true Mandalorians. Not Death Watch, by the way, who are the Mandalorians that eventually won that war and who had the Dark Saber. So that could be recanonized. Jango Fett could technically have a lineage claim to the throne, but Pre Vizsla would have the real claim to the throne because he had a Dark Saber. So Boba Fett doesn't even have it then, but even then, he's not really a Mandalorian, and no outsider shall rule Mandalore. I think that's true. Bo-Katan does as well. There could be some that disagree. Some could say, oh, Maul is the rightful ruler. In fact, that's what happens. There are several Mandalorians who are like, well, Maul won. He's the Mandalore now. We don't care if he's Mandalorian. He is the Mandalorian, or he is the Mandalore. He's the ruler. So you could say that doesn't really matter, but to me and to many Mandalorians, it does matter that Boba hasn't sworn the creed. I mean, maybe he did. I don't think he did, though. His father was a foundling, but he's not. He's clearly a bounty hunter. In fact, who is it? It's Bo-Katan says that he's not worthy of his armor. She wouldn't say that she wouldn't say that if he was a Mandalorian. So yeah, Boba I don't think has a rightful claim to the throne of Mandalore, but I guess you could twist it and say he does. It doesn't make sense to me. Then there is Bo-Katan, who was the sister of the Queen of Mandalore, or Duchess of Mandalore. However, that Mandalore was the new Mandalore and isn't really connected to the Dark Saber. She does have the Dark Saber for a bit, but she was it to what's his name? It's Moff Gideon, and who gets defeated by Mando. So she doesn't really have a rightful claim either. But Mando has a claim to the throne because he has the Dark Saber. He is the clearest path, but at the same time, he doesn't really want to rule Mandalore. And that's the other thing with Boba Fett. I don't think he would want to rule Mandalore. Although, he did take over... I'll talk about that later. I'm running out of time. I've got to go at 12:30, or at least that's what I was told. I don't think it's, like, set in stone. 12:30, we're leaving the house. But it's, like, 12:30 is the time we're aiming for. So I'm going to have to go soon. But before I do that, Boba probably wouldn't want to rule Mandalore. Bo-Katan definitely does, and she's disregarded the rules before. In fact, you even see her break her word in Chapter 11, so I don't think Mando should trust her. I think she's actually going to be... She could be the antagonist of Season 3, which would be very interesting. But Season 3, that's going to be awesome, but another thing that's totally going to be awesome is I forget what it's called. Oh, man. I think it's called The Book of Boba Fett. Anyways, it's the Boba Show. So, and if you don't know what this is, basically, okay, so I was I actually recorded my reaction. I don't know if I'll ever like release that. If you want to see that, just leave it in the comments or in the chat. I can probably edit that down and release it. And I've done that for all but chapter 5 because I was busy that day, so I had like downloaded it and watched it in the car. So I don't have my reaction to that one, sadly. That's a good one to react to. But this one, I have a pretty extreme reaction to. Super awesome. But anyways, I was, I've lost my train of thought. Right, so I was reacting to it, and it finished the episode, and I was just sitting there, enjoying the music from the credits, and just thinking about the possibilities that this presented. And I was just thinking, I had no idea, but suddenly, there was an end credits scene, which I was shocked and just filled with joy by, because I found it so naturally. Like, I wasn't expecting it, and just happened to see it. It's just awesome. And if you haven't seen this, this is obviously in chapter 16, post-credit scene. It's right after the credits. So go watch that if you haven't. But if you have, I'm going to do a spoiler discussion about that. So you see, what's his name? It's the one, like, pale Twi'lek guy. He's ruling Jabba's palace, which, that makes sense. But, I mean, he had, like, nothing. So, I mean, he had the whole palace, but there was, like, no one in the palace. He had, like, a droid, a Twi'lek, that's it. And then Fennec Shand walks down, takes out pretty much everyone. The rest run away. He frees the slave, and Boba comes down and shoots, again, I don't remember his name. The pale Twi'lek guy. Why don't I remember his name? Very strange. What's his B? It's a B. It's a no. I don't remember his name. Tell me in the comments. Anyways, Boba shoots that guy, takes the throne, and sets up his own show where I think he's gonna be rebuilding Jabba's glory. Because obviously with Jabba gone for at least 5 years, and yeah, Jabba's been gone for at least 5 years. Like, you even see in the Aftermath books, what's the one guy? I don't remember his name either. I'm forgetting so many Jabba names. It's the guy who takes care of the Rancor. He's basically hired by Cobb Vanth to look after a new Fett, or a new hut, which would be cool if they tie that into Boba's storyline, Boba's book or something. I don't remember the name. So many names to keep track of. Bib Fortuna! That's the pale Twi'lek guy. Oh my goodness. That was so hard to remember. Bib Fortuna. That's a good name. Star Wars has such good names. Like Din Djarin. Oh wow. So cool. And then there's Anakin Skywalker. I guess Luke is kind of eh. But Leia. Vader. Such good names. Maul's a bit weird, and Savage Opress, but Savage Opress. Like if you pronounce it normally, it's Savage Opress. It's like 2 words, but they're actually named. It's anyways. Yeah, Bib Fortuna gets shot by Boba, and Boba sets his own show, which I'm very excited to see. It's coming in about 1 year, so that's a long time to wait. But I've waited for things for longer. Like the sequels, 2 years. Fortunately, I guess unfortunately, I didn't have to wait for like the 3-year time in between the prequel and prequel and original movies. I first thought fortunately, but then of course I had the realization, wait, if I had to wait that long, that meant I would get to see it in theaters. So it is unfortunate. And I've got to go, so sorry about that. End of the stream pretty quick. Bye.